Welcome everybody. What we're going to talk about in this video is a must-know for vegans. And even if you're not a vegan, I think it's a must-know for everybody. And it's the missing link, I think, for a lot of vegans, because bottom line, whether you're doing any type of diet and you're putting certain food groups together, paleo, keto, it all comes down to some basic rules in nutrition, folks. Okay? Foods all have values, and we're going to talk specifically about the vegan foods and their values and maybe some truths or lies about what's said out there. Now, you know I'm not a big person on talking points, right? I hate when people just do bullet points and make statements. They wear a lab coat with maybe an RD, MD on it, and they're making statements, and they're not giving you the science behind those statements. And I don't want to do that. I want to be able to bring to you the science in almost everything I talk about. So I'm not just doing talking points, but I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty. But I also like to bring you the talking points of what some other people are doing, because that's just bringing it to the table, right? Because if you're not doing that, then it doesn't make sense when you bring the science. So when we talk about the missing link in vegan diet, there's missing links in a lot of the diets. It really comes down to understanding the macronutrients, which are protein, fiber, carbs, and fats, and understanding how those macronutrients work in your body and supplying the energy needs and some basic functions. And then what goes in combination with those macronutrients are all the chemicals, the vitamins, the minerals, the photochemicals, phytochemicals, flavonoids, all these little chemicals. There's over 6,000 of these little chemicals in foods that can really benefit us in different ways. And then the gut alone creates a fermentation process that creates chemicals. So we've got all these chemicals that are doing all these side chain reactions. And I guess we could spend years in talking about all those different ones. But bottom line, if you eat certain foods, you're going to be guaranteed to get those chemicals. We're going to talk about that in this video. And if you exclude certain foods, you may be excluding certain chemicals. And we're going to talk about that also in this video. But bottom line, what I really bring to the table when I talk about a lot of disease is making sure you get the macronutrients right: protein, fiber, carbs, and fat. And those macronutrients are going to be in most of the diets. Most of them, I say. And they're definitely in the vegan diet. So in the vegan diet, what we look at is, number one, making sure we're getting those macronutrients right, because that's going to be the case in any diet, right? And then looking at all the chemicals underneath. So when we look at the missing link with the vegan diet, unfortunately, some people are not getting the macronutrients right, okay? And we're going to show you some food examples and how easy it is to get off mark, but how easy it is to get right back on. So it's just understanding how to do some basic nutrition within the keto, not the keto, whoa, that's totally the opposite, vegan diet. And also how some of these chemicals may not be adequately supplied in some of the foods you're eating as a vegan. But it's a real easy supplementation, easy to do, okay? And there's only a few of them. And also we'll talk about how the vegan diet can really make a difference in certain health benefits. So Sammy, if you're ready, let's go to the PowerPoint. And I know that a lot of people listen, so I'm getting really good at not just looking at a PowerPoint and expecting you to see what I see, but I'm trying to really be able to describe what's on the PowerPoint so you can listen to this and not have to watch the PowerPoint. Okay, so let's get right into it. And we'll talk about the missing link. And first of all, what is a vegan diet? Okay, most people on this live stream might already know that, but maybe most people don't. It's a plant-based diet. It's a plant food diet where you're eating mostly from plants. There's no animals. So that means no chicken, fish, no dairy, strictly plants. It's going to be your potatoes, your beans, your vegetables, your fruits, all these really foods that come from the ground. This is what a plant-based diet is. So why are people vegans? And there's three really main reasons. Number one, compassion for animals. And I think that's a pretty good reason. I mean, seriously, when you look at some of the, truly what goes on in some of the food system, which a lot of people don't realize, and I'm not saying that's the case with everything, because it's certainly not. You can't make one statement and say it's a statement for everything. But as far as mass food production and what they do to animals, not real kind. So they have a high degree of compassion for animals. And then concern for the environment. And there's a lot of bullet points on that. So I'm not going to get into those two areas, right? But when people say, why are people vegans? The three areas are compassion for animals, concern for the environment, and also concern for health. So a lot of people are vegans because they want to be healthier. So what I'm going to do in this video is show you that being a vegan may not be healthier unless you're doing certain things correctly. Okay? So let's get right into it. Let's talk about the controversy, because that really is what it comes down to with a vegan is vegan even healthy? I mean, we can talk about the controversy. I don't think anybody's going to actually debate compassion for animals. So let's just put that one to the side. I know there's a lot of pros and cons regarding the environment. I'm not going to get into that. So when we look at the controversy for health, there's still a lot in there where I'll see a lot on the internet. Vegan diet isn't healthy, and they're listing all the reasons why. And I'm even going to show you some of those studies, because I think it's important to see that some of the leading experts are not sure if a vegan diet is where we should be. Of course, some people feel the opposite. But what I see it coming down to when I'm looking at all the information out there is that they're saying, hey, it's not our evolutionary footprint, right? Like, it's not how the cavemen did it. So bottom line, I'm not even going to go there with that one. They talk about going back to the origin of 5,000 years ago of evolution and the livestock, and I get all that. But you know what? I can't really pull a caveman out and start doing any research on him, so we don't have that. And 5,000 years ago, none of us were there, so it's kind of hypothetical. Do we really know? So I'm going to say we're going to put that one on the bench. And we're going to say we're not going to use that because we really can't get some good factuals on that one. And then let's go to the next one. Inadequate protein and inadequate of certain vitamins and minerals, which are zinc, iron, calcium, B12, vitamin D, iodine. And I'm going to have to agree with that. There is some truth to that. But we want to make sure if you're a vegan, we can just nick that one right off the table, right? So we're going to look at how vegans typically eat, and we're going to look at the measurement of some of those values. Because to me, folks, that's a really easy fix, okay? And I'm not saying you can't get it from food alone, but it may be a little more difficult because you really have to be on target. You have to eat certain amounts, and it might be better to just take a doggone supplement. For sure, for vegans, I can tell you right off the table, B12, vitamin D, and iodine are going to be some supplements. Unless you're doing iodized salt, then there's no need. So it's really down to B12 and vitamin D if you want to do a short list. And then the last reason that I typically hear out there, which is sort of weird, but I see it out there, is that it's an increased risk factor for heart disease, stroke, cancer, and diabetes, because they talk about a vegan diet. It's just so high in carbs and that it can cause a lot of disruption in blood sugar, and that they're even showing studies that people that are on a vegan diet, it doesn't mean they're going to have less incidences of heart attacks and strokes. That we're saying, well, just because you're a vegan doesn't mean that that's necessarily the case. And I'm going to have to agree with that, okay? Because I myself see in my practice vegans and vegetarians that don't have great labs when it comes to cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. And I know that's really super hard to hear that, because we can then see a lot of clinical evidence that shows all the plant-based foods that are so rich in these nutrients. And that's the big thing that it brings to the table, is that a lot of these plant-based foods are so rich in some of these phytochemicals that you really, wow, it's 10,000 times more than what you can get in some of the animal products, because it's coming from the ground, okay? But that's not going to hold it. It really isn't. For a vegan, you just can't ride on that alone. So there is some truth in the fact there's some inadequacies with a vegan diet if you don't know how to eat vegan. Just because you're eating vegan, you're really compassionate about the animals and the environment. I get all that. But you also want to make a vegan diet super healthy and not just depend on the nutrient-rich compounds that are in plants. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what's going on with the UN, World Health Organization. Not that we use them as a standard. And the reason why I typically like to use standards that are going to be more biochemical is because a lot of times, and I see it with the CDC, I see it with a lot of information out there, they're talking points, they're bullet points. Well, we observe this in a lot of communities. Well, observing something is one thing, but actually understanding the pathology of something is entirely different, okay? So I say observations are kind of skimpy. And a lot of times, even with marketing information that we get from companies that say, this is the best substance ever, it's some basic chemical that polyphenol they found in a plant because there's 6,000 of them. So I'm sure there's a lot out there they're going to be extrapolating and marketing. But bottom line, when you look at the marketing information, it's bullet points. Oh yeah, when 100 people did this, we had 99 feel great and they were so strong, and it listened to all the testimonials. And that to me is just BS. You can't depend on anecdotal and talking points, right? You got to get down to the science. So to me, the science isn't even just about studies, or it isn't even about people that are wearing a lab coat with fancy initials on it and just saying, well, because they said it must be true. We got to really kind of hold them to the fire. So bottom line, we'll talk about some talking points. UN and World Health Organizations, the UN and Food Agricultural Organizations, I'm reading this straight from there, concluded this week in a report that contributions of animal source foods to healthy diets for an improved nutrition and health outcomes. When consumed as part of a sustainable dietary pattern, meat and other food derived from animals on land can play a vital role in fulfilling the nutritional objectives of the UN and Sustainable Development Code. So first of all, we don't even know what their goals or what their code is or what they believe in. And again, it would just be a bunch of talking points because I doubt they're going to get into the science of vegan or not vegan or meat or what it does or what it doesn't do. They're going to just look at communities and say, wow, well, when they did have animal proteins, they seem to do better. And there could be a really good reason why, right? We got to look at a lot of many other variables. So I'm not going to discount that. And then they go on to talk about humans evolved to live on, meat. They were evolved to be meat eaters. And it can be assumed that meat is at least part of the human anatomy and metabolism, what we were compatible with. And they go on to stress that meat is a high quality food. And it's true, it is. And it has significant nutritional benefits, and it does. So I'm not going to dispute any of this. And the WHO, the beneficial effects, they say, of plant-based diets, including protection, they also say that it helps provide against premature mortality, provides strong evidence that it's a good guideline to do. Of course, they're not going to get into all the nitty-gritty. So they're saying not much. It's just a bunch of ugly wash, biggie wash, or whatever. But a lot of times people will extrapolate one thing one organization says and they'll blow it up. Again, making more talking points. So I only say this because if you are a vegan watching this, you're going, yeah, I know. I see it all the time. And it just angers me because I have all this compassion for animals and what's going on in the environment. And I'm doing the best healthy thing for me. So I get the frustration. So when we look at some of the biochemistry truths, and I want to get into that, and I'll go back into some of the studies again because I think it's good. You can't just bring one viewpoint, right? Because if you do that, then you sort of lose respect from everybody. Then they're like, well, you didn't really talk about all the biochemistry. And I get that because there is good biochemistry with what's in meat and some of these animal products. I'm not going to deny that. But then you got to look at the whole picture. And you got to look at where the patient is. And this is a really big caveat, I got to say right now. As an RD, I don't just prescribe one diet. I don't just say, oh yeah, well, everybody do the vegan diet, everybody do the paleo diet, keto diet. As a registered dietitian, my job is to look at people individually and look at who they are clinically, because there's many times I've advised a keto diet in certain instances, and I can clearly explain to you the biochemistry why. Now, that isn't something that I would want them to do long term because it doesn't fit the macronutrient analysis of what we should be eating. But for a short-term period and to get a certain results based on somebody's current medical condition, it could be just the right diet for them. And you also can't say people that have all these other medical conditions that one diet is just going to be this diet for everybody, because it's just not true. Okay? There can be a lot of autoimmune conditions that can warrant different types of diets. Okay? So I understand that. But at the end of the day, one truth we can hold on to is you've got to get the macronutrients right. You need a certain number of protein, fiber, carbs, and fat, okay? Now, I know with certain rare autoimmune conditions, carbohydrates can carry some problematic issues because with carbs can come some food sensitivities. I understand that, okay? So once again, I'm not dialing in one diet for everybody, but those macronutrients do mean something, because the body depends on those macronutrients to do function in our body. And then on the layer below that, it's our vitamins and minerals and some of the chemicals that these foods create. They go on to act as cofactors. They go on to be the building blocks so that these macronutrients can do their job. And that's basic nutrition. Okay, so we're going to look at how the vegan diet holds up to that. And to me, this is part of the missing link that I want to share with vegans. This is where you got to get this right. So we're not going to do the caveman one. We already pushed that aside. So let's talk about inadequate protein. First of all, let's get this myth that if you do plant-based proteins, they're less quality than animal. That's just not true, okay? All proteins break down to amino acids. Now, animal proteins definitely are more bioavailable. What does that mean? That just means they're easier to get to. But once you get to them, they still hold the candle to a plant-based protein, okay? Because once these proteins break down, they break down into amino acids. Now, the different types of amino acids and the different amounts, there's a lot of controversy there. With a plant-based diet, does it have less methionine or different types of branched chain? We can really get a discussion with all the amino acids, but I really feel it's splitting hairs. Because at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is making sure you get the right amount of protein to maintain your body and making sure you're eating it often. You just can't eat protein once a day and think it's a done deal, because protein, okay, needs to be eaten at least 2 to 3 times in the day. And when I teach people how to eat in my program, the Lean Life program, I explain how protein should be eaten at every meal. I really feel strongly about that because it can be used as a good balancing factor as well, controlling the glucose in the blood and helping with some other areas in trying to create this balanced diet. But let's get back to protein in adequate amounts. You need an adequate amount of protein to maintain muscle mass, and that's super important because if you don't maintain your muscle mass, okay, your body will then eat you for it because the body uses protein to make every single thing in your body. So not having enough protein can be a real problem. So we have to look at making sure we get the right amount of protein for our body weight, and because it's not as bioavailable as the animal protein, we have to eat just a little more. That's it. That's it. That's all we got to make sure we do. And we have to eat it not at one time a day. Okay, preferably 2 to 3 times a day. You want to get the protein in. So how much more do you need? Now, I have a little formula that I do, and I know if you're listening and you're not watching the video, let me explain. It's real easy. Take your body weight, divide it by 2. Everybody can do that in their head, right? So if you weigh 150 pounds and you divide it by 2, it's 75 grams. And then all you really need is about 10 to 15% more of that. At the most 20%. Okay? You wouldn't need any more than that for vegan. You just need to cover yourself for a little extra. So when I look at 150 pounds and I divide it by 2 and it's 75 grams, and even if I multiply it by 20% more, I'm going to be 85 to 90 grams of protein. We just want to make sure that we don't limit the amount of protein we need. And that's where vegans can sometimes kind of go south. So we'll talk about some values of protein and see how easy it is to bring the protein into the diet. So when we look at the protein grams, come back to the macro, we'll come back. So when we look at protein, hold on, let me get the right slide for that. Nope, I got it. Okay, so I just kind of did average protein grams for kind of an average vegan eating healthy. So imagine if you're not eating healthy, but you can always look at a food label, and a food label will give you the grams of protein, right? So we all know that we can look at a label, it's going to say protein, it's going to give you grams, and right there you're going to get a lot of information. So if you take your body weight and you divide it by 2, and then let's say you add 10 or 15%, or just add even 20% if you wanted to be at the high end, you're going to get a pretty good idea. So let's say you take you're right now listening to this and you're like, I can't do the math because I'm exercising or I'm driving in my car. Okay, take your body weight, divide it by 2, and add about 15 grams. Okay, that'll give you a good estimation. So when we look at, and that's for the day, right? So that means at each meal, you might want to get anywhere from 20 to 30 grams, depending on whatever that total daily amount is. And your body can't absorb all that protein at one time. So forget about eating one big meal a day, because what happens if you just eat one big meal a day of protein and you skip protein throughout the meals, your body can begin to metabolize your own muscle tissue as if it gets too low, okay? So let's look at beans and lentils. And I just did this based on a cup cooked, okay? So we have a cup cooked of beans and lentils. On average, you got 15 grams of protein. You got a cup of edamame, and you got 20 grams. You got a cup of tofu, and you got 18 grams. You got a cup of veggies, and I just put in the big, all veggies. Some are 2, some are 4, some are 3. So I'm going to say a cup of veggies, you're going to be anywhere from 3 to 4 grams protein. A cup of fruit, 1 gram. A potato, any kind of the potatoes, you're probably looking at 2 grams. And grains, as long as they're whole grains, we're not talking about white rice. We're talking about whole grains. Quinoa, whole wheat pasta, whole grains, farro. That's going to be 7 to 8 grams of protein. So ideally, if you added all those together, and I had something there. I guess I must have forgot to put it in there. But if you added all that together, that comes out to, let's see, 20, 30, 40, 50, it's about 60 grams, maybe 60 to 70 grams. If you were to eat all that, you ate a cup of beans and you ate a cup of grains, you had a potato, you had a fruit, you had a cup of veggies, you had a cup of tofu, and you put all that together, you'd probably be at 60 grams. Here's another example. Let's say we did 2 cups of beans, 3 cups of veggies, 2 cups of grains, 2 fruits, and a cup of tofu. You'd be at 75 to 85 grams of protein. So I think you can do fine, depending on how much you weigh. If you're a big guy, right, and you need 100 grams of protein, then I really advise with my patients to bring in some of these plant-based protein powders, because you can easily make a protein shake, and 1 scoop is going to be 20 to 25. So a lot of times with my vegans, I'm just having them do some protein powder. And I know I do as standard is I have a latte in the morning with my almond milk and my little coffee, and I always put a half a scoop of protein powder in there. And it just makes it taste a little better, actually. And I use the chocolate plant-based protein. And right there in my coffee in the morning, if I have 2 cups, I'm getting 20 grams of protein right there. That's just a little trick I've always done. To me, it tastes really good. You kind of have to get used to it. So adding some of these protein powders are really so advantageous. And a lot of times, my vegans are a little shy of protein, to be honest with you. And that's not a good thing, because your body is going to metabolize muscle tissue. And a lot of times if you metabolize muscle tissue, you don't get muscle back, right? You got to go work out for it. And protein is so instrumental. These amino acids work as cofactors for so many other things like enzymes, and they're so instrumental in our health that we just don't want to be short of protein. So I wanted to show that because I think visually, and let me just run through the values, because in case you were listening, 2 cups of beans, 30 grams of protein. 3 cups of vegetables, 12 grams of protein. 2 cups of grains, 15 grams of protein. 2 fruits, 2 grams of protein. 1 cup of tofu, 18 grams of protein. It's 75 to 80, 85 grams. So if you're not really watching it and you're not reading food labels and you're a vegan, you're really compassionate about animals, you're really looking out for the environment, and you just figure, well, vegans should be healthy, right? No, it's not. If you're not paying attention to some of these other factors, okay? So let's go on. Let's talk about inadequacy in vitamins and minerals. And there's really some that I think are really worth pointing out because there's some truth into it. Zinc, iron, calcium, B12, vitamin D, and iodine. Now, iodine is a no-brainer, and we can take that one off the shelf if you're buying iodized salt. Yeah, a lot of people do these designer salts, these sea salts or whatever. They're not going to have iodine. And a lot of salt that's in processed food is not going to be fortified with iodine, okay? So I think it's worth just buying iodized salt, and really a teaspoon of that pretty much covers you. It's 150 micrograms is what you need. But if you're really stuck on your special salts, or maybe you're on a salt-free diet, then it might be worth looking into your multivitamin, making sure you have enough iodine. Now, I'm not talking about megadosing, because I've had on several YouTube, I talk about megadosing means you're taking a vitamin as a drug, right? This is going to be based on maybe a little more than your daily amount, because I do think some of the recommended daily allowances were done so many years ago. I don't think that they're doing us a service. I think that they need to be re-looked at, because some of those levels are really, I think, even too low for some function from some of the research we've gotten. But I'm not talking about megadosing, right? So let's look at what we need for the day. When we look at zinc, we need anywhere from, to be really hitting the mark in the immunity, not the RDA, just in the immunity, and where some of the studies are showing 20 to 25 milligrams. Anything over 50 milligrams of zinc. Now, I know everybody takes zinc when you got that cold. You're just, doing a little megadosing. I'm not concerned about a week or two of megadosing on zinc. I'm saying where you're consistently taking supplements with a lot of zinc, you have to be careful. Because anything over 50 milligrams could cause a problem with the absorption of iron and copper, because zinc, copper, and iron, they all compete for the same receptor site to get that doggone vitamin, that doggone mineral into the cell. And if you're flooding it up with a lot of zinc, then you're not allowing some of these other minerals to be absorbed into the cell. So for zinc, I really do like to see most of my patients up around 25, even 30 milligrams, right? So that's a really good idea to bring that zinc up. It helps with immunity. And with vegans, we can be a little low on zinc. So I wanted to, again, point out some of the typical vegan foods. So I based it again on a cup of beans and lentils. Remember, 25 milligrams of zinc, and we're really looking good. And a cup of beans and lentils has 1.3. Edamame, 2.1. Tofu, 0.6. Green veggies, 0.3. Kale, 0.13. Spinach, 1.3. Fruit, 0.8. Sweet potato, 0.3. Grains, 2.1. Now, these aren't totally exact, right? There's different varieties of vegetables. Might be a little more, might be a little less, but it's pretty much an average. So on average, vegans, you guys are getting 10 milligrams of zinc on average. Probably half of what you need for the day. So it would be worth it to take a little buffer of that, wouldn't it? Iron. Okay, what do we need in iron? Menopausal women, once you go past menstruation, your iron goes down. But if you're menstruating, your iron goes up. So for men and women, on average, it's 10 milligrams. But if you're menstruating, it's up to 18 milligrams. So let's go through that same list. 18 milligrams. How do we fare out as a vegan? Beans and lentils for 1 cup, 2.1. Edamame, 3.5. Tofu, 2. Green vegetables, 0.8. Kale, 1. Spinach, 6.4. Wow, 1 cup of cooked spinach. A lot of iron there. Fruit, 0.2. Sweet potato, 0.7. Grains, anywhere from 4 to 5 milligrams. Now, a lot of grains are fortified with iron, a lot of cereals. So sometimes you're okay there because you can look on the box and you can say, wow, this cereal, they're fortifying with iron. So a lot of foods that are in grains in boxes, you're going to see some fortification, and that figure may be actually even low. On average, just from that list, if you ate a cup of beans, edamame, tofu, green vegetables, kale, spinach, sweet potato, grains, you're going to be anywhere from 14 to 18 milligrams. So for a vegan, the iron is kind of on the table. I think you have to take a personal look to see where you are with that. Calcium, on average, 1,200 milligrams. So how do we fare with that? Because everybody thinks of calcium to just be in dairy. And really, actually, when you look at bone health, it isn't just about calcium. You have vitamin D as much bigger factor with bone health. And you have other cofactors like magnesium. By the way, vegan diet does great with magnesium. So with calcium, a cup of beans is 27 milligrams. Remember, I said 1,200 is what you need for the day. 27 milligrams. Cup of edamame is 97. Tofu, 32. Most green vegetables are going to be 40. Green is the key with calcium. Kale, a cup of cooked kale is 177 milligrams of calcium. Spinach is 245. Fruits, 10. Sweet potatoes, 40. Grains are 40. Again, calcium for most vegans, if they're eating pretty healthy and they're eating a lot of greens, let's say you ate 2 cups of cooked spinach. You're almost at half your day's worth right there. Let's say you ate 2 cups of kale. I mean, you can bring in a lot of calcium if you're an educated vegan. But just looking at a cup of cooked spinach, a cup of kale, and a sweet potato, and just some of the basic ones, it's about 700 to 800 milligrams of calcium. So, yeah, I could see a vegan could be a little low on calcium for sure. B12, it's 0 down the row. So B12, unless you're doing nutritional yeast, I forgot to put that on there, because nutritional yeast will give you 100% of your B12. So nutritional yeast is for a vegan where they can go. And I think there's also some other, gosh darn, I didn't look at, there was a couple other plant-based, one other, and I can't remember, that did have B12. But as a rule of thumb, unless you're doing nutritional yeast, I always recommend vegans to supplement with B12. And iodine is 150 micrograms. And you know what I forgot to put up here was vitamin D. Vitamin D, and I can just tell you this, vitamin D down the line, there's very low levels of, you just can't get vitamin D as a vegan. Very tough to do. Now, we get vitamin D from the sun. So let's go there. If you're in the sun, you're going to get, within an hour of being in the sun, you could get 100% of your vitamin D from sunlight. So I think it's pretty amazing that vitamin D is pretty low in food, but we can go outside and get it. Now, with a lot of skin cancer and what's out there, a lot of people don't want to get in the sun. We've also got a lot of research out on vitamin D circulating in the bloodstream. Has some huge immune benefits. So just from an immune standpoint for a vegan, I'm going to say it's worth supplementing with vitamin D, because we don't want to just be high in vitamin D in the summer months and then be low in the winter months. Because when you have vitamin D in your blood, your immune system gets kicked up. That's where all the studies are coming in. And really, I like to see most of my patients at least 50 to 60 on those vitamin D tests, NGMLs. I want them to be higher than what they consider 30. So you go to your doctor, you might be at 30 or 35. They're going to say, oh yeah, you're fine, because they don't want you less than 30. I'm going to say studies show that we want you to actually be double that, because of what we're seeing with the immunity and vitamin D. So if I really look at this as a vegan, and I'm giving you some really good information here, yeah, I think it's worth doing some supplementation, because then you have the stress of really trying to get it right with the food. So let's talk about some of these risk factors. So let's summarize. So for a vegan, we really want to make sure we get enough protein. Adequate amount of protein. We take our body weight divided by 2, add 15 grams on top of that, you'll be covered. Protein powder is pretty good, plant-based, because it'll kind of, I think one scoop of that in whatever, maybe a protein shake sometimes is enough just to bring people up to where they need to be. Okay. And then as far as getting the right vitamins and minerals, absolutely vitamin D and B12 if you're not going to be in the sun. And I'm not sure I would agree with being in the sun would be so great. Let me find the slide where I get there. Okay, so supplementation would be vitamin D, B12, iodine if you're doing iodized salt, that's not necessary, zinc, 25 milligrams. And I know a lot of times they talk about the omega-3s. A lot of times vegans can really be eating a lot of these omega-6s and really disrupt this fatty acid balance, which we're gonna talk about next. So let's talk about the disease factor, the risk factors. And I don't really want to say it's for vegan necessarily, but a lot of times I'll see they're pulling it out for a vegan, probably because the vegan is just eating plant-based but not super healthy, and they're missing some key points, right? But what I do see is that they do talk about vegans can get what's called homocysteine, which is a protein in the blood. I'm going to explain that to you next. I have a video on that called Glutathione and the MTHFR gene. If you go to my YouTube channel and you click on the biochemical pathway of the MTHFR gene and glutathione, this really explains this protein homocysteine very well. Homocysteine is a protein that can build up in the blood because some people can lack an enzyme that breaks down vitamin B9, that breaks down folate. And because they have a mutation, it's called the MTHFR, it really creates some problems for them because they don't do well with B12 as well. Because B12, a lot of these vitamins work in synergy. So just to take B12, I always recommend take the whole B complex. Make sure you get the B12 because you're vegan. But what can happen is some people can have this gene, and it's like 25% of the population. Now, if you're taking a B complex and you're taking a methylated, and my video, the glutathione and MTHFR video, really discusses this, you're going to be fine. So with a vegan, there are some education that you have to take on in regards to really being a really super healthy vegan, and understanding that homocysteine can happen to a vegan like it can happen to anybody in any diet. And it's a protein that when it is in the blood, it's associated with 40% risk factor for stroke, heart attacks. Not a good thing, right? So homocysteine builds up in the blood because we lack enzymes to properly metabolize folate. When you lack that enzyme, and also too, as you age, you may not make enough glutathione, which is an antioxidant. But what can happen is that we can create this protein that puts us at risk for cardiovascular disease, also cancers. So even though a vegan diet has so many wonderful nutrients tied in with these plants, and it creates so many chemicals in the gut and all these great things I can talk about, if you happen to have this genotype, a mutation, you can still be at risk and be a vegan, okay? So I've seen studies that talk about vegans are at risk for homocysteine. Well, anybody's at risk for homocysteine, okay? And how we fix it is we make sure when we take a B12, it's methylated. And we also want to make sure we take folate that's methylated, okay? So that's B9. So we want to take folate that's methylated, and we want to take B12 methylated. And it'll say right there, methylcobalamin. If it doesn't say methyl, it's not methylated. And if it's methylated, and you are somebody that has this gene mutation, then you don't need to worry, because the gene that you're missing methylates. But when you take a methylated source, you are taking it already methylated for you. So you don't have to worry about having the gene do it for you. You're taking a vitamin where it's methylated already. But you can be a vegan and you can still have this going on. So when I talk about vegans, they're really not, I think being a vegan, you're going to be less at risk for sure, for many reasons, because plants provide so many chemicals. They provide this fiber that does so many great things that we'll talk about. But you can still be low in protein, and you can still have excess fats. So we talk about making sure to get the right protein grams in the diet, and we now are going to talk about fat grams. Because a lot of people don't realize, a lot of vegans, even if they're getting the right amount of protein, they're just eating too many fats. Even healthy fats can be a problem. Now, if you watch my YouTube videos, you're always going to see I bring up, and it's going to be no different in this one. Sorry if you're watching it 100 times, but it's worth discussing 100 times. And if you're a vegan and you're watching it the first time, then I definitely have to mention it. So excess fatty acids are a problem, okay? Fats are important, and they help. They line all cells. They're super important. I'm not saying that essential fats, especially, we need them, but not at the amounts that we're eating. And vegans, you're not at all excused from this. In fact, sometimes I see vegans that have a lot of cardiovascular disease, believe it or not. And they have type 2 diabetes because they're not understanding these macronutrients, protein, carbs, fats, and fibers. They make a difference. And the fats make a difference in the sense that when we have an excess of fats, fatty acids circulating, they can do two things. They can create bad cholesterols, right? Because LDL is part of fats, right? Now, there's some genes that can tolerate more, can tolerate less. I understand there's a variable there. But bottom line, We get from our doctor a lipid panel when we go in to get our physical, right? We get a lipid panel, and it's going to show us our bad cholesterols and our good cholesterols. And the bad cholesterols are easily oxidized. So let me just show you a picture as I draw it. I'm also going to speak it, so I know as you're listening, you can get that visual picture. When your body just lives as a human, you create what are called free radicals. And I always say you got to think of a free radical the same as you think of a fire that burns and smoke is released. Free radicals are released because you're a little furnace, right? And you release free radicals. That's kind of the smoke in the body. But then the body does a wonderful thing. It creates something called glutathione. And glutathione neutralizes these free radicals. Now, why do these free radicals need to be neutralized? Because free radicals oxidize things. Oxidizing things that free radicals do are very damaging. It destroys healthy tissue. The most favorite thing free radicals love to oxidize are LDL fats. They like to oxidize a lot of other things, but LDL fats, which are the bad cholesterols, they love to oxidize. And when these free radicals oxidize these fats, it causes inflammation. And this inflammation then triggers an inflammatory cascade that is the root cause of heart disease, plaque in the arteries. So glutathione was created by the liver, and a lot of our other cells create glutathione. Several different pathways create glutathione. One of them is the folate, okay, and B12 pathway. That needs the enzyme MTHFR. And if you don't have that enzyme, you better be methylated when you take those vitamins. But that's one way the body makes glutathione. The liver has an enzyme that can make some glutathione, and even in the mitochondria we can make some glutathione. So glutathione, okay, is what's called an antioxidant. So if you're a vegan and 20% of the population have this gene type, you could be in big trouble because you could be getting heart disease even though you're eating all these plants because maybe you don't make enough glutathione. So what happens in the artery is these LDL fats sit in the wall of that artery, and so do these free radicals. This causes inflammation. And when you have inflammation in the body, you then trigger immune cells. One of those immune cells are macrophages. They create a foam cell to try to put out all this inflammation in the wall of the artery. This foam cell then hardens. It becomes plaque. Big problem. So we want to make sure that we take a lot of antioxidants. So we know that vitamin C is an antioxidant. Just like glutathione, it attaches to these free radicals and neutralizes them. Because when a free radical is neutralized, when it has an antioxidant, it can't oxidize. That's why they're called antioxidants, because they stop the oxidation of free radicals that are natural compounds that happen just because you're breathing. So antioxidants are super rich in a vegan diet because antioxidants come from a lot of our colorful vegetables. So a vegan is eating a lot of antioxidants. It's high in sweet potatoes, everything colorful. If you're eating a high animal-based diet, there's not as many antioxidants there. Sorry. It's just the way it is. So that's the good news, is that vegans are probably getting a lot of this antioxidant activity on these free radicals. But there's other things that can also affect it, right? A lot of these LDLs. And when you have a vegan that doesn't understand that the macronutrients matter. Now, if you're a vegan and you're eating a lot of these plants, then you're probably going to be more protected than a vegan that's not, right? Because a lot of vegans don't necessarily eat all these plants. They just eat a no animal diet. So they can get some protection from the antioxidants, but they can also have elevated LDLs because of excess fatty acids that circulate. And now let's talk about excess fatty acids. And the best way to go there is to describe the pathology of excess fatty acids when they accumulate in muscle cells. So when you eat carbohydrates, healthy carbs like beans and lentils and pasta and quinoa and all the great carbs that vegans eat, those carbs break down into glucose. The glucose enters the bloodstream. And at the same time, the body then releases insulin. Now, the reason insulin's released is to deliver the glucose into the muscle and into the brain cell. So insulin attaches to a receptor site that sits on the muscle cell. That same receptor site sits on neuronal cells in the brain. And what happens is when insulin sits on that receptor site, on the cell membrane of muscles, it talks to a messenger who talks to another messenger, and that then allows a transporter to come to the surface of the muscle cell. And that transporter, when it comes to the surface of the muscle cell, it is the gatekeeper. It is what allows, trying to get my cursor to come up there and do that, it allows the sugar to go into the muscle. So I'm not sure why, if you're watching, why that's not coming to the surface. Maybe Sammy can help me. For some reason, I can't get my cursor to move. So what happens is insulin sits on that receptor site. There we go. Got my cursor back. And that brings the transporter to the surface, and it allows glucose into the muscle cell. But what happens with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, which, by the way, vegans, you're not off the hook on this one, when you're having a lot of excess fatty acids because you're just eating too much fat. And we need at least 30% of our diet fat, right? So 30% of our diet, maybe 35%. What does that mean in grams on average? It's anywhere from 50 to 80 grams of fat a day. You can have one avocado, be it 20 grams. You can have a cup of nuts and be at 40 grams, literally. So one avocado and a cup of nuts, which vegans say it was all healthy, you're already at 100% of your day's worth of fat. And then you do the olive oils on top of it. And next thing you know, you're up over 100 and 120 grams of fat. On average, most of us, maybe 60 to 70 grams would be about 30% of our diet. So what happens with a lot of these excess fats is they circulate in the bloodstream and they can begin to accumulate in muscle cells. And these excess, and the word here is excess, guys, because fats are good. I don't want to discount, and especially vegan fats, right? The avocados and the nuts, great, good fats. But the word here is excess. Macronutrients matter, okay? So you get too little protein and too many fats, and you're a vegan, you're in trouble. Even though you're eating a lot of antioxidants, I'm saying there's a lot of healthy components in these plant foods. Hooray, good for you. I love the fiber. There's just a lot of good things about the vegan diet. But if you're not paying attention, just like any nutrition in any diet, this can make a difference. And I think especially with vegans, they get this false sense of, I'm eating super healthy because I'm eating all these plants. And I'm telling you, I see vegans that are insulin resistant because as these fatty acids accumulate in muscles, they begin to clog up these receptor sites. Therefore, the transporter never makes it to the surface of the muscle cell. The transporter is what allows glucose into the muscle cell. So the glucose begins to build up in the bloodstream. And of course, fat cells are very receptive. They'll open up to any excess of anything. And the fat cell is sitting there waiting. And literally the glucose that was meant for the muscle and the brain goes into the fat cells, typically in the belly area. So we see a big muffin top. So many times vegans can be overweight because they're not understanding these macronutrients mean something. So excess fatty acids just like with the macronutrients, and I talk about as a dietitian, we want to get the right ratio of protein, fiber, carbs, and fats. And with a vegan, the two areas that I see where they get the macronutrients off, not enough protein and too many fats. Because these fats can literally contribute to type 2 diabetes. The excess fatty acids accumulate in muscle cells that then clog up the receptor sites that insulin docks on to allow a transporter to push the sugar into the muscle cell. And this is a big problem because this creates insulin resistance, which is literally type 2 diabetes a decade or two before. Seldomly being diagnosed because they wait till you're diabetic. They wait till so many of those receptor sites are clogged and out of commission. So I see athletes getting insulin resistance, and I definitely see vegans. You guys are not immune to this. Okay? So that's what you have to know as a vegan. You have to know that protein matters. Make sure you get enough. And excess fats are a problem. And then as far as knowing what supplements you need to take. Vitamin D, because I'm not advising people go out in the sun for an hour or two. And I mean, maybe in the summer you're covered. But the fact that vitamin D in the plasma, in circulation, okay, has profound significance with immunity. Why not? Anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 IUs. Now, I know the RDA is like something as low as 700, but you can't get up to that 50,000 you can't get up to the 50 to 60 mark on your blood work with just 1,000 IUs a day. I don't really see it with my patients. Of course, you should always get a vitamin D test, right? But on average, what I see when I'm supplementing patients, it's going to be 2,000 to 4,000. And for some people, it can actually even be a little more. And then B12, anywhere from 20 to 50 micrograms. But we have to make sure it's methylated and that you're taking it with folate that's also methylated. And just take the whole B complex because there's so many wonderful things that are going on with niacin, riboflavin, so many of the other B vitamins are instrumental in the mitochondria. They're instrumental in the synergy. So don't just take B12. Might as well take the complex. Might as well. You don't have to megadose. Iodine, I don't see a need if you're taking iodized salt, but if you're not, anywhere from 150 to 300 micrograms. Zinc, 25 milligrams. And then for the omega-3s, I mean, if you're taking a teaspoon of flaxseed or chia seeds, even some pumpkin seeds, I don't think the omega-3s, if you're supplementing with the foods that have it, but you have to watch the fats, right? You're going to be covered there. But you can always take a flaxseed supplement, oil, that'll work. And then maybe iron, and I say maybe iron. I'm not a big proponent of supplementation for iron because iron supplements can be a problem with the gut, okay? And for me, it's like, hey, if you're taking a multivitamin, it has 5, 8, maybe 10 milligrams of iron. Okay, that might be a nice little buffer if you're administrating. And calcium. I'm also not a big proponent of excess calcium supplementation. But clearly, you might need a little supplementation of calcium, but what really helps with the bone health is going to be more of the vitamin D, honestly. But calcium is important, especially if you're a vegan. It might just mean you need 300 milligrams, just enough to cover you, especially if you're eating a lot of those greens. That could work for you. So these are just, as a vegan, the vegan diet to me is really an amazing diet in the sense if you're really doing it wholeheartedly. Because when I look at reversing cardiovascular disease, and I want to fast train. I mean, I literally want to get the quickest bullet there. I got somebody in deep, deep trouble. I am literally putting them on a plant-based diet. Low fat, plant-based diet, and I'm making sure I get them the supplements they need. Because within literally 5 to 6 months, you can get amazing results, more so than I've seen on any other diet for cardiovascular disease. Now, it can be very hard for people to do the vegan. Not if you're a vegan and you're watching this, you're going, oh my gosh, it's so easy. I get it. But for the average person, it can be difficult. It's you go to a restaurant. This is my biggest pet peeve. You go to a restaurant, you try to order vegan, and they're giving you something that's worthless, like a cauliflower steak. I'm like, what? There's no protein in it, and it's fried, literally. I mean, they're putting it on a pan with oil, and it's soaking up all the oil. Or they're going to get fried tofu with, it's just not even adequate in some of these restaurants because they don't understand nutrition. So some of the vegan options are not as nutritious. I hate to say it, is having my patient get 2 or 3 ounces of fish and get 2 sides of vegetables because I worry about, are you getting the protein that you need? Now, some people live in areas that it's easy, and you have restaurants that do that, but many people in many parts of the country don't, okay? So when I look at nutrition, I'm always looking at those macronutrients. I want to make sure that you're meeting your macronutrient value. That's key. And when you're a vegan, it doesn't mean you don't need to pay attention to that as well. And then the supplements. So I am looking at the time. I try not to get over an hour. I hope I answered a lot of questions. I want to leave it open in the chat in case people have further questions.
Oh, so Myrna, there was a little bit of a tech issue. So
okay.
If you could just scroll back, I linked the studies
okay.
in the description below. I think everyone can hear me.
Okay.
And just skim through them, but they can also read them on.
Well, the studies, and I'll be honest with you, Sam, they were just showing the talking points of people saying, some of the.
Right, but I would just wanted to just.
Oh yeah, well this study here. Oh yeah, this was a good one.
Yeah,
this
is linked in the description below.
Okay, this was by Dietitian Pros, dietitians that write in, and it's just research on diabetes and vegetarian diets. I know it's not vegan, but they do talk about how these, more of a plant-based diet actually reduces the risk, lowers the risk for diabetes, heart disease. So I think there's a lot of research that shows that even with diabetes, they're showing, and this study, I'll read the highlighted area, this RD comments. Finally, a small study on 93 Asian people with diabetes compared the effects of a brown rice vegan diet, which provided an average of 76% of calories from carbohydrates, in a Korean Diabetes Association diet, which averaged 64% carbohydrates. While both were improved, the A1C levels, researchers found the vegan diet to be slightly more effective with a more considerable reduction in A1C levels after 12 weeks. So basically what they're saying is carbs are not an issue with diabetes. And I just showed you that what causes type 2 diabetes is excess fatty acids. Okay, that's it, folks. The carbs are literally the symptom of it. We don't have enough time to talk about balancing all this, but as a dietitian, you come into my membership, that's exactly what I do, is I teach you how to do that. What I wanted to show in this video for vegans, some of the things you guys got to be looking out for. But anyways, yeah, Samantha, if you can share some of these.
Yeah, they're in the description below.
Yeah, and some of them were, they talked a little bit about cardiovascular disease benefits, pros and cons of vegan. I was going to throw them out there. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that. I wanted to get to the nitty gritty, really nail down as a vegan what you need to be watching out for and what you need to be doing. Not, of course, leaving out some of the controversy too. I get it. So you want to go, should we go to the chat, see if there's anybody that's had any questions?
Yeah, let me see. I don't think there's some comments. Hold on.
Okay. Okay, there it is.
Yeah. Okay, just don't.
Yes, that's true. I have a vegan talking about tempeh, tofu, vegan meats. The thing with vegan meats is you got to watch out for the fats, okay? Some of the vegan meats, like the Impossible Burger, it's got 17 or 15 to 17 grams of fat. So all I'm saying, you're a vegan, you got to look at the protein and look at the fat. You're not going to be out of the woods with that, okay? I'm not even vegan, and I add some collagen powder in my coffee in the morning. It's tasteless, but it gives me that protein boost. And I'm going to say that as a dietitian, honestly, I try to get most of my patients on a lot of plant foods because of the benefit of them. But I'm always bringing those macronutrients into the equation. I see the biggest result when I have my patients on managing those macronutrients, lower in fat, and really more of a plant-based diet. I mean, I'm just stating a fact. I see their lipid panels, their diabetes panels. I see it improve. I'm not married to any diet. Like I said, I've used other diets for different disease states, so I'm not locking any statement in that regards, okay? But I'm just telling you what I do see in my lab values. And yes, I can't say I am 100% a vegan, because I know that for me, when I go out to restaurants, it's really tough for me to find, especially if I'm going out with a group of people. And I can't say, well, we're going to go to my restaurant. Sorry, everybody's got to eat what I eat. It doesn't work that well. You won't have a great marriage that way either. So I will do fish. And I'm always going to do it grilled. I'm going to, see if I can find someone to split it with me, because you don't need to have 10 ounces of it. But, I mean, so I can't really say that. So I wanted to make that clear. But I do believe that, trying to be as close to plant-based as I think I find for cardiovascular disease and diabetes, I'm not going to discuss other disease states, okay? Because I don't want people to make all these comments like, well, I have, autoimmune, I've got all these other things. We're not going there with that, right? In regards to the lab values for those two. Don't forget to hit the like button, and feel free to share the stream. Definitely do that, guys. I really appreciate that. It really helps. Don't come after the avocados. No, avocados are good. Okay, nuts are good. Understand, walnuts have the omega-3s. I'm just shedding light on the macronutrients, folks. Okay, you got all foods. The difference between healthy and balanced are two different things. You can eat a lot of healthy foods. Okay, avocados are healthy, nuts are healthy. Even healthy foods, if you don't get the macronutrients right, it can be a not healthy situation. Okay, so a lot of excess fats, what I'm seeing, not such a great thing. But fats are super important. And if you're going to get the fats, get them from the avocados and the nuts, for sure. All right, and we had small tech issues. Samantha, you hopefully took care of those, right?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't think we have any more.
No, that's it.
Awesome, guys. Till next week. Thank you so much. I appreciate your patronage. It's really important to me. So till next time. And you can always give me, I picked this comment because somebody asked me to do it. So I'm always open for suggestions. Okay, thank you. And I'll see you next week.
Wait. I'm gonna end it. There you go.
Okay.